Sorta Ridiculous is sponsored in part by Drunken Cobra. Drunken Cobra is a diverse, inclusive neighborhood pub in East Tosa. It offers year-round weekly events like karaoke and music performances. Drunken Cobra is located at 6818 West North Avenue. Drunken Cobra, obey the snake. Hey folks, how are you doing? It's time for another episode of Sorta Ridiculous. Smash the button. Psh, smash the button. Psh. 2 times now, y'all. Psh, psh, cha cha real smooth. Do 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 Ipanema. All right. So, my name is Darren, and that's usually my name most of the time. And Billy Ray is being all cultural and seeing a film today. But we have a guest that's really cool. This guy I've known him for about 12 years, and he's more or less directly or indirectly have been involved in most of the creative things that I've done here in Milwaukee. So join me in welcoming Matt Kemple. Woo! How you doing, sir?
I'm great. That was quite the intro too. Thank you.
Oh no, hey, I appreciate you, man. I greatly appreciate you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what you guys need to know is, Billy Ray and I, we're angry young men. We're the puppet troupe here in River West, elsewhere. So, we used to do shows in Oriental and whatnot, and then this gem opened up. Not little, this gem opened up in Grand Avenue Mall called the Underground Collaborative, in which was a really dope space for us to do our puppet stuff. That's right. So that's who we have in the house tonight, and there's even more. So let's get into it. So, with you being a new guest, I have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
You ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, cool. So question 1. Answer me. There's questions 3. All right. So
I like voices too. I don't have a chance to do voices very much, and you've already thrown more at me than I was expecting. I just have my regular voice right now.
Oh, don't worry. We're gonna extract
there.
a half dozen of them out of you today. All right. So question 1. What is something sort of ridiculous about you?
I think it's probably really ridiculous, but I'll just, for the sake of argument, I'll say it's sort of ridiculous that I produce comedy for a living. I think that is a ridiculous thing that anybody could do, and I didn't know you could do it until I was doing it.
Dude, no, I feel you. I totally feel you on that. It's I didn't realize how there weren't as many producers as I thought there would be on the scene. So when I produced my first show last October, and I was like, this is cool, and I don't even have to be the funniest person. And I kind of like not being the funniest person, so, because I'm more of a host than anything else. Not that I can't be funny, because apparently I am. But yeah, so what do you like about producing comedy?
It is challenging, but it is fun and rewarding, and you meet lots of cool people, and it's nice because when I was growing up, I was kind of the weirdo, and now all the weirdos are just normal people around me all the time.
Right.
That's the best part, I think, is that, I get to do something I really enjoy. I learn something new, every show that I work. And I've been doing it a long time and it's still not stale. It's still fun. It's still exciting. There's still new, things I hope I can do someday.
Oh, no, I feel you on that. So what have been some of the more rewarding parts of producing comedy shows?
I think just, for me in the early days, what I truly loved was just getting a huge room of people to laugh together and to have that power to bring a whole group of people together for something really positive like comedy. I think is an amazing thing, because if somebody, everybody's coming from their own world. You have no idea what they're coming from, what kind of life they're living, who they just left at home to come and see a comedy show. And then it's all about just being in that moment and enjoying it. And to me, from a very early point in my career, I really only felt like it was worth doing if the audience was having a good time and the comics on stage are having a good time. Then that meant that was a good show. But you had to have both of those things for it to be possible.
I agree.
Yeah. More recently, it's seeing how far you can take things. How many quality shows can you put on? How many shows, can you work on with bigger and bigger names? It's been exciting for me to work with people that have been on TV that I've watched and enjoyed their comedy, and then you get to meet them and you find out they're nice people and they're funny and you have that connection. And to me, it's just like it's extremely rewarding, to have that end of things.
Oh yeah, I've seen. Oh, by the way, is one of the owners of the Laughing Tap, which is awesome. That's just one of many things. But yeah, no, I've seen some great shows. I've seen some great shows there. Shows are like headlined by Chastity Washington. The Barons Bros show, that was fun, having Tom Johnson and a bunch of cool folks there. It's a huge space. I mean, it's a cool space, and I remember when that place was Bucket Works.
Yeah. And so here's something, I don't know if you know this, but when I first moved to town, I think it's 19 years this June. The first real job that I got was at Bucket Works.
Are you serious?
Their original location is where their Associated Bank on MLK and McKinley is, right across from where the whole stadium arena.
Oh
area
yeah, I
is.
remember that.
So
yeah.
and then they moved over to Valete Street where the public museum is about to be built. But I got a job there. Basically, I was a volunteer, and then I had moved to town. It's a long story, but basically my job was to help create a theater program there, and that's what I did. Is I built a stage and we started to do theater productions, and I did that for a couple of years, and that was really kind of how I started to produce on a more professional level. And I started to produce a lot of comedy way back in those days, but it was mostly sketch and improv comedy. But there you go, it's kind of all full circle that now I'm back years later, and I think the third or fourth spot that Bucket Works had been in.
Yeah, that's actually pretty neat. I did not know that. That's I miss Bucket Works, but I believe what you're doing with that space, considering what it was, what that particular area was like in Bucket Works, you're doing. It looks so much more professional. It's slick in there.
Thanks. Well,
and I mean, colors.
It was a brewery after Bucket Works, and they really did a lot of the. They built that bar that's in there and everything. They actually spent, the $1 million it took to make that look nice.
Good God.
It was probably at least that, yeah, because, I mean, they had huge brewing tanks and everything in there for making beer. It was quite the operation.
Yeah, no, that's slick. All right, so, okay, let's get to question 2. All right, so question 2. What is something sort of ridiculous to you?
It's kind of along the same as the first question. It's comedy, but it is the idea that you can do this for a living is kind of ridiculous to me. It is very difficult. And as much fun and rewarding as it is, the challenges that come with it, I really wouldn't wish this kind of career on my worst enemy sometimes, dealing with the books and, running a venue and talent and contracts and trying to fill those seats every single time. It's extremely stressful. And, sometimes you wonder, does the joy, outweigh the pain? And, most of the time it does. Sometimes, I'm not so sure, but you just keep doing it and you hope that what you're doing is the right thing and you're making good decisions, and
I totally feel you on that. So I think I'm producing my 6th show next Saturday at Battle Lounge, and I'm
cool,
kind of it's my second time there. I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of nervous about it, actually. The ticket sales are so low, but I know a lot of people they purchase tickets sort of last minute and whatnot. So
I'll tell you,
surge.
I mean, I still do. I've been doing this almost basically 20 years, and I still lose sleep all the time because of ticket sales. Even when a show is going to sell out, it's still so difficult to just wonder, and you're like, come on. And then you think back to every friend that's ever been oh yeah, I can't wait to come see one of your shows. And you're like, all right, bro, here's the flyer. I'll see you there.
Right. And then ghost. crickets.
Yeah.
You get a
yeah.
bunch of like friendly, unfamiliar faces
Yeah.
that become familiar faces. Yeah, that's very wild. I've been fortunate to be in a situation that I am, but as a producer, uh, and being as experienced as you are, what are some of the main things that you focus on, and what are some things that people would necessarily think about that goes with producing?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. I think for me, what really drives me is the little details in a show. And that's really what is going to make or break a show, because you can always find a space. You can always, find chairs and all those like physical things that you need.
Mm-hmm.
But it could come down to, what if the mic cables break? Do you have a plan for that? Do you even have mic cables? Do you have I've done shows without microphones before.
What?
Just as an oversight, it was like, well, if you're going into different spaces and you think, oh, the venue has something. We've done shows where venues promise you one thing and they don't have it. So just kind of being prepared for some of those situations and then not needing it is some good advice, not needing to have problems come up. But just like it comes down to the details. And I know like in the Underground Collaborative that you mentioned that was around for so long, that place was crazy because I needed to create a system to figure out how many people were in there, which seems like such a simple thing. It's like, well, don't you just know? But there were so many little rooms and nooks and crannies.
It looked like an office, offices down
It had
there.
been built out for the YMCA originally, and in the space next to us, which is True School.
Mm-hmm.
It was all part of the YMCA originally, which was then moved up to the 4th floor years later. And that was like their office, and like there was like weight machines in there years ago and stuff. It was like crazy. And but that's the thing is like I couldn't figure out like why are we running out of toilet paper? Like I thought people were stealing our toilet paper, and I'm like, we really didn't have a lot of money. We were in the basement of a dead mall, like there wasn't any money. That's why we're down there. And you realize, oh geez, there's only 6 people in this room. Oh, but yeah, there's another 6 people in that room, and then there's 10 people in the dance studio, and then we have 15 people working on, and then you're like, you start doing the math, and you're like, there's 50, 60, 75 people in the space right now, and you don't even realize it because everybody's in their own little rooms and rehearsing and practicing and trying to be and like people are quiet because they're trying to be courteous to other people, or it's like deep, heavy play rehearsals, and those would always be the most quiet, where you had no idea there's 15 people in the room, and you just hear the 4 like improvised comedy players in the other room that are just like whackity schmackity doo.
Yes, and
So honestly, like it was the little things. It was figuring out like having like you can use like big business terms, like having the resources you need to produce. But what it came down to was like, do we have enough toilet paper if we have a show? It's such a crazy question to have to ask yourself.
Right.
But that was the thing is like I had run other people's venues for many years, and I hadn't been running my own venue. So, I might have had to go buy toilet paper for other venues, but it was because my boss said, go get toilet. And I didn't think about those numbers. And then you're in that situation and you're like, oh yeah, there's other, like, we got to figure this out. So it really can come down to, the details. Sorry, that was a very long answer to a short question.
That's perfect. So one thing I remember about the Underground Collaborative, much like you said,
toilet paper constantly running out. No,
all of the mini rooms or conjoined rooms and whatnot. Yes, but a lot of time down there, and it was so cool to just even have that equivalent of green rooms down there. And it was so. And you didn't know what was going on. And then the space itself, I like how it was set up in that corner, all painted black, proper, classic.
Thanks.
And everything.
I painted every inch of that room myself too.
Yeah?
Yes.
Man. All right, rando question.
Yeah.
So, what is the most absurd, bizarre thing, performance that has happened?
I know right away. And
Yeah.
it was such a fun one. I don't even know the guy's name. And maybe if he hears this, I mean, honestly, River West is the perfect place to ask this question because somebody in River West is going to know this guy.
Right.
So it was super random. It was maybe halfway through the life of the UC. It was 8 years it had to close in 2020, just for listeners who didn't know, because of the pandemic. But maybe like year 4 or 5, around there, maybe year 6, there was this guy who was graduating from UWM, and I think he was like doing a thesis project, and he had art on the walls, and he had all these musicians, and he had asked, like, he wanted to be able to use all the different rooms. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a weird thing, but whatever you want. And so there were these really interesting art pieces on the wall, you know, and I couldn't really tell you what they were specifically. And then there were these roaming musicians. There was like a violin player and a saxophone player and like a guitar and some vocals and things like that. And they would go like room to room, and some would be in a room and do some kind of music or song, and then they would switch places, and so it was really confusing, but there were a lot of people came. And so just wait a minute and I'll tell you like what was really going on.
Yeah.
So the music was like, if you've ever listened to Philip Glass, if you know who that is, it's like real absurd avant-garde, like it's almost like rhythmic noise in a way, where there might be like these single notes on a keyboard being played, and then like a violin note would come in randomly, and then a violin, and you're like, what are we listening to? But it was interesting and intriguing. So what this guy had done was he had taken art, and I think he was the artist, and he had taken his art and he pixelated it to the point where he then blew up this imagery to the point where there are these dots and dashes that, you know, extremely zoomed in. And the musicians were playing those dots and dashes as music.
What?
And yes, and it blew all these years later, I remember we did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events down there. I mean, I would say, I know I counted one time, it was probably more than 1,000 events. And that was the one that really stood out. Like, it wasn't even anything it was something on like a Sunday night, I think, or a Tuesday evening or something. And it was just this real weird avant-garde side thing. Like, the guy just was a student. I remember I rented it to him dirt cheap because he didn't have a lot of money. I was like, well, this place is here for art, and this is a weird. And so, yeah, to see, like, it made so much sense. I was like, what's going on here? He goes, oh, they're playing the art as music. He pixelated the art to the point where he was able to put it onto, you know, music lines, and that's what the artists were playing.
That's wild. That is amazing.
It's insane.
Yo, being a fan of pixel art and everything, to be able to blow it, that I would have loved to have seen that. Then you had the Roman musicians as well.
And that's the thing, is like everybody knew each other, and I was really the only one that was the outsider because I was the guy with the keys, you know, just like watching the front door, and people are just like, and I mean, to me, that like level of creativity and that way of thinking completely outside of the box and doing something where you're like, oh no, the music is the visual that's represented on the wall. I mean, it blew my mind. So yeah, there you go.
That's dope. That is truly dope.
Yeah, and that's honestly, on so many levels, that's what the UC was really about, was creating art that, you know, not everybody saw, but it meant something, you know, even if it was just to those people. And to me, that piece still resonates with me. Like, I'll never forget that. That was incredible.
Right. All right. So you had the UC, and you said that you started, as far as production, you started with comedy. All right. So
well, yeah, I came from a theater background, and then comedy kind of came out of. We used to play these comedy sports theater games before theater shows, before plays. And I was like, oh, that part I really like. And I mean, I was a theater professional for many, many years, and then comedy kind of came out of that. And then, but I really started to focus on comedy, like, once the UC was kind of the real catalyst to pushing comedy full time.
Right. So you're a performer as well as a producer.
I don't say I'm a performer anymore. I definitely... I used to act. I used to strictly be like an actor, and then I got into producing because I went to a small school, and I was just kind of like, if there was a reason to do art, I was going to do it. And
Right.
I was excited to just jump into any project I could. And it was one of those like, oh, we don't have like anybody to paint this. And I was like, oh, I'll paint it. Oh, we don't have anybody to like, lug this stuff in and build and put it together. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And so I was like acting in shows, and I would like be the sound guy on the show that I was also acting in. And I remember
Wait, what?
this is like
This
a
is
whole
like Dick
other
Van Dyke and Mary Poppins.
back in Ohio, where I'm from, when I worked at this children's theater, and I would do everything. I was because I didn't make any money as an actor. They hired me on as a set painter and stuff, so I'd put the sets together, and then I would like have to hit a sound cue and then run downstairs and do my whole thing, and then run back upstairs and fade out the cue, and I knew like exactly how long the music was. Yeah, it was a whole. Many years of weirdness like that.
That's very ambitious, and that sounds like a lot of fun, overwhelming, and yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. So doing both of those at the same time. So one thing that I've noticed, so I started my stand-up journey last year, like January, and when I started to make the transition into producing, I found that I was working significantly less on my sets and whatnot, because producing just takes so much. You're doing so much producing, but I love it. But I feel like I'm neglecting the craft a little bit. So I'm trying to find the balance between performing and producing.
Yeah.
Because
That's a tough one. If you would like some advice,
please.
I have lots of bad advice. I'm always willing to dish
I'm
out.
all about it.
One thing I'd say is that you're absolutely right. It's difficult to do both things well. My first bit of advice is try to get on other people's shows if you're not already, and have that be your focus for the stand-up. And then the shows that you're putting on, try to focus on the producing as much as you can. Now, obviously, I know like you probably want to produce to also get stage time, and also like as somebody who's on stage, sometimes you need somebody in charge, and so sometimes you step into that producer role too. But that's what I would say is like I used to be an actor and director and a lot more in that theater world, and then I was just like, I think I've done this piece as much as I want. I'm going to focus on this piece now and just do and that's kind of really how that production side came down. But you kind of have to, and I'm not saying you have to abandon one and only do the other. You might be like, this week I'm just going to focus on stand-up. This week I'm only going to focus on producing, and it can be that dichotomy, but you can't necessarily do them both at the same time. Like you say, there's so many things you got to deal with. And I know like there's been times where I was hosting a show and also doing box office of the same show, and at the UC too, where it's that long hallway. And there were times that I would have to, I'd be on stage and I can see a customer needed help. And then you gotta
like mid-show.
Oh yeah, all the time,
Man,
all the time.
that was a long hallway, man.
Yeah, so that's, just as somebody that's experienced it, you can try to do both as much as possible, but there's a point where you're either on that stage talking to the audience, or you're 40 feet away, 50 feet away, helping a customer with a ticket, and you can't do those two things at the same time all the time.
Right,
so,
especially if you're like functioning at such a at a professional level on both.
Well, and even unprofessionally,
Okay,
but it's even just like a like a work-life balance. It's the same thing. You have to make sure that there's a balance between those things. Otherwise, one might take over the other, and that can create resentment. I have friends that wanted to be actors, and we were acting together, and they ended up teaching to part. And now they're just teachers, and they're like, "Oh man, I never became an actor." And it's like there can be regrets there, or it can be the other way around. Oh my gosh, I never knew I wanted to be a teacher, or I never knew I wanted to be a producer. I use my hands a lot, which only the video will show people.
Yes, he's very expressive with his hands. Which, if you want to see this video, it'll be up within like the next week and a half or so on the Sorta Ridiculous YouTube, and you can find more information on that at sortaridiculous.com, the Sorta Ridiculous Instagram, Facebook. The TikTok is still inactive, but you can find it.
Smoke signals. I know you're everywhere.
I try.
Yeah.
I try. So when it comes to when I lean, I'm kind of leaning more towards the producing because it's definitely more financially sound and consistent. Hey,
Hey, but not always. I mean, there's been plenty of shows I've done where, we promised comics money and then nobody showed up.
Oh my God!
And
yeah,
it's happened to me earlier in my career, and it's happened to me very much far into my professional career and everywhere in between. So, I mean, it can be, but I mean, at the same time, like the Laughing Tap, whether we sell tickets or not, the bills still have to be paid.
Of
And
course.
Sometimes that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, and I mentioned being nervous for this next show. I do have sort of that situation, but I don't know how it's going to play out. But I'm very nervous about not breaking even with this. Although I know, like the first few shows, I came pretty close, but I had a decent crowd. But I'm still working out like all the intricate parts of all the parts, paying the comedians, figuring out like what the pay should be, and I've been fortunate to use venues where I host karaoke at, so I haven't really ran into any issues as far as venues are concerned.
That's good. I mean, that's awesome actually, because you already have a relationship with them. You already know, a lot of things. One, they have a microphone that works. So
right. Well, actually, since with hosting karaoke, I am like the Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. I bring everything. If they have speakers and microphones, perfect. Just
Yeah.
like you said, but I'm always prepared. It's like I treat every event like it's a wedding.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because you're right, because somebody is going to love that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a bride or a groom might love that moment. A comic might love that show because you never know. It could be their first show they ever got paid for. It could be the first show they're ever on, even. It could be the first time that they worked with another comic that they've always wanted to work with, I always get excited whenever comics say things like that years and years later, too. They'll be like, did you know you're the first one that ever paid me for comedy? I was like, really?
What?
I was like, did you know you did like 20 shows for me before I ever was able to pay you? And they're like, yeah.
Oh man, no, that's wild. That's definitely wild. So I guess as a producer of comedy, you end up impacting comedians in ways that you never know.
Yeah.
Huh. That's why. So who are some of the comedians that you felt very fortunate to work with? Like maybe your top 3 comedians.
Oh my, that's a tough question because I could have 100 different categories of top 3. The
Prestige.
one of the coolest people to work with was Colin Quinn, who was on Saturday Night Live. He used to do Weekend Update and during like the Kevin Nealon years in like the late 90s and stuff. And we had him in the Milwaukee Comedy Festival back in, I think it was 2018.
All right, folks. So if you want to hear more of this, you're going to have to listen to the extra video. Thanks for listening to Sorta Ridiculous, you guys. Catch you next week.